Hi and welcome to the latest episode of the Leadership Untitled podcast, the show that brings together experts from the world of leadership and or leadership development and L&D and has them share their experiences and insights and also some of the traps that they've fallen into to help make sure that you don't fall into the same ones. My guest this week is Tim Roberts. Tim, coming from a learning and development background, has become Mr. Emotional Intelligence through his motivational speaking tours, leadership coaching and facilitation programs. Cultivating an online following with his hashtag #ItAlwaysStartsWithYou movement. He believes that emotional intelligence is the key piece in the work and leadership puzzle, and the one that is so easily missed or ignored in the pursuit of profits and results. He joins me today to explore this and more, so time to welcome Tim to the podcast. Hi Tim, welcome to the Leadership Untitled podcast. How are you doing today, mate?
I'm really good, thanks, Rob. Sorry, I know the listener might hear I'm just finishing my cup of tea to get ready. No, I'm really good, Rob, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me as a guest. I'm dead excited about this.
Oh no, thank you for coming along. Like I say, for the listener, we've just been chewing the fat for about 20 minutes about various things, and having our coffee and our water and everything prepared for the next hour is exactly what we've been talking about and getting ready for. And I managed to get you just as you were finishing that last drop there.
You did. Good timing. I needed it, to be fair. I can't do anything unless I know it was green tea, but I can't do anything unless I've had a cup of tea.
Oh, you're on the green tea brigade, are you?
Yeah, I'm ready for it now.
Sorted. So thanks for joining us today. It's I'm really looking forward to the conversation as well. The kind of idea that I've been pushing in these podcasts is that, you know, leadership is pretty much the key to everything. And there's definitely an L&D angle from my background that I want to explore in that. And the reason for that angle as well is that, you know, leadership is also within L&D, and that's a big part of it. And leadership development tends to get pushed from L&D and coaching and all those sort of things. But equally, I try and veer away from it just being too academic. So myself and we were just talking before about the Chris Lewis episode 3 of the podcast, a real story of leadership. Sometimes I'll have leadership experts like Graham Wilson on talking about the more sort of academic and approach to it and the theory behind it. But then equally, it's about bridging it into the real world as well. And that's one of the reasons for bringing you in today and asking if you'd join me, because very much a lot of, or most if not all of what you do and what I see online about is around emotional intelligence. And I've posted a lot of things over my time about emotional intelligence, and I've had the conversations with you in the past as well around it, that, you know, sometimes I think it gets misrepresented and sometimes I think it's another bandwagon that people jump on. But at its essence, it's absolutely another vital thing that great leadership stands for and inherits, so it's able to do its job properly. So I guess, you know, for the listener out there, Tim, do you want to give us an overview of what it is you do, the company, and how you got into that, I suppose, is a good way of starting us.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Rob. Am I allowed to say I feel a bit starstruck being on this podcast because that's what you said to Chris Lewis, and I listened to that this morning. So it feels quite almost an out-of-body experience that having listened to a cricketing hero of mine growing up, and obviously we've talked about cricket already, so we won't get into that, to then now be in my head the next guest. It's brilliant. So yeah, I suppose actually there's a link there. That's one of the reasons why I do what I do, to be able to have these kind of conversations and, you know, to be able to engage with people like yourself. So yeah, in terms of what I do, I help people to become the leader that they want to be. That's my focus. My focus is about helping leaders to make those positive choices. And how do I do that? Very much through learning experiences, through coaching, both one-to-one, and then working with leadership teams or leadership groups. And I also do a number of inspirational talks. I'm a keynote speaker. And my focus is around emotional intelligence. So I guess a couple of things I'm known for, shall we say, is that it always starts with you. That's my key message that underpins everything, and that's built from emotional intelligence. And also the favourite quote of mine, which is emotional intelligence will get you further in life than anything else. In terms of kind of how I got here, so my business is called Enthuse Coaching, and I chose the word enthuse because I spent many years having my enthusiasm battered out of me. Wow. And encouraged to leave that at the door and get on with managing people. Tim, and have you done this task? And have you sent that email? So for me, when there was a bit of breaking into freedom and deciding to take the risk of setting up my own business and chasing, I'll say it as it is, chasing the dream. For me, it was about working with people to create that enthusiasm, because we're here to talk about leadership today. It always starts with you. So to be a leader, you have to lead yourself, and you can't do that without enthusiasm. So that was a really, really big driver of mine in terms of, an ambition, or my mission is to help as many leaders as I possibly can to develop and apply that emotional intelligence.
No, I think it's absolutely spot on. My leadership framework that I use, C12, the first two elements of my overall playbook are exactly that: manage yourself first, and then manage others. And when I say yourself, I think I project that at different levels as well, because I think the individual self is the first port of call, absolutely.
Yes.
And then when I talk about teams like L&D and HR, I also say there's that collective self, that it's easy for the likes of L&D and HR as those big teams to go to others. This is how you should be leading. This is how you should be treating your people. But do you do that yourselves? And again, to actually sit back. So, some of the things might be legacy and energy that I talk about, and fulfillment. So from a personal level, what's that? But also from a team level, what is it as an L&D function? What is it as a sales function? What is it as an HR function? What's your dream?
Yeah.
Collective dream. And again, you've got to be able to do that and understand that about your collective self before others. Is that something you find as well when you're doing your piece that you get into a lot?
Absolutely. I love how you introduced about talking about the real world. That's where I do my work. I'm very, very adamant and determined that we talk about it in the real world, and we engage with people in the way that we talk to each other. If we were down the pub, or if you were talking to your best friend, I'm not dumbing it down in any way there. However, it's about breaking through the corporate bullshit.
Yep.
And it's doing exactly what you talked about there, Rob. In that team, what's the dream? Because nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, my dream today is to tick some boxes and to chase up people to do this and to write a report that says, you haven't done this. Nobody has that dream. I'm sorry, but you don't.
There's a couple of people I've met that have come across like they do, but I don't think they have. I don't think it's actually their dream. I agree.
Yeah. or maybe they've sleepwalked into that becoming their routine. They've given up. That's my view. I will stand up for that. I'll have that out with anybody.
Yeah.
That's what happens to people. We give up. And it's, like you were talking about there, it's interesting about the dream. A piece of work that I do with many clients is around, it gets called performance management. I refuse to call it that, because why are you managing people's performance? You don't need to manage my performance. I will lead my performance myself. So we flip that and talk about inspiring performance. And in part of that, I encourage people to include in the conversations, asking for a leader, every member of their team, what's your biggest dream? And this year it might be to buy my own house.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. How can I support you in that? What do you need from me to help you with that? They might just want to go, well, can you give me a pay rise? Well, no, I can't. All right, well, you could give me some advice on what to do. What we're doing when we're having those kind of conversations, you're creating the environment. So people now, when they get asked that question, go, my employer wants to know what my dream is.
Yeah.
And that's what creates engagement. It's what starts to develop. It helps to develop some emotional intelligence, because what you're doing is helping people to make positive choices as to how they respond to the thoughts and feelings. So yeah, it's something I'm very passionate about, really, particularly when working with teams. They say, well, what's the dream of this team? What's the purpose? Why are you here? What do you want people to say about you as a team? And really getting them to explore that, because you're right, before we know it, we get lost in KPIs, in managing things and managing people. And, again, what we've got to remember is, nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, yes, I get to be managed today. we intrinsically want to be led. If our manager is contacting us, we want that to be a positive conversation. We want it to feel good. I want to lead it with enthusiasm.
Yep.
So for me, that's where my work focuses, is encouraging leaders to look at it that way, to have the conversation with their teams, to really start to build that for themselves, So when I get up in the morning, I might be part of an HR team, I might be part of an L&D team, I might be part of an ops team in a transport business, in a retail business, in a manufacturing business. Yeah, I can talk about my dream. I can talk about what intrinsic motivation is for me. So then I know my leader cares.
Yeah.
I know that they want to talk about that. And from a leadership point of view, it builds that team full of awareness.
Yeah.
You know, if my last boss had asked me what my dream is, they wouldn't have fell out with me when I told them I was leaving to work for myself.
Yeah, because they didn't know.
Yeah, they never explored it. They asked me how many numbers I can put in a box on a report that they send to a C-suite that none of them read. That's not a dream, is it? No. So the other thing with the leader is if you start to flip it that way, when a member of your team does say, I'm moving on, you're ready for that. You've sponsored them, you've mentored them. It doesn't have to become personal. It doesn't have to add to your stress levels, because you know that Tim's dream is to work with leaders every day to help them to become the leader that they want to be.
Yeah.
And that dream can never be realized in one employer. So that was a big choice of mine, to follow that dream, because I know to have the ability, have the opportunity to do that, I could never stay in one employer, because you're just not going to be able to do it, are you? That dream doesn't exist in the confines of a business that's 150 people or even 150,000 people. It just doesn't. So yeah, it's a fascinating concept when we actually start to talk to people about, you know, the dreams. And remember, I've got two daughters who are now 8 and 11. You ask them what the dreams are. Yeah, thanks, mate. I know. Yeah. I think I'm going to be working internationally when they turn teenagers.
Oh, mine's 15. If you need any notes, then
I will. Yeah, I definitely will. Well, my eldest turned 11 on Tuesday, and it was almost a bit like the famous Kevin the Teenager sketch. Yeah. You know, when he wakes up, you know, you look at each other. Me and my wife going, she's not got any toys. All she's got is clothes and money and trainers. What are we going to do? But it's, you know, the point I'm making in terms of referencing our informative years, kids do now get asked, what's your dream?
Yeah.
Our youngest has got a poster on the wall that says dream big and, dream happy. Yeah, it's like, well, yeah, but when you get to 16, forget all that, because now you can get into the real world. Now you can get a job. And I buy into that. I understand that we need to work hard, and we already talk to our daughters about careers, and the big thing my wife always talk about is you've got to work hard. You know, it's not about getting A stars, it's about how much work you put into it. Can you tell I'm trying to get a growth mindset into an 8-year-old and 11-year-old? Is that embarrassing? But
we all do it. We all get told that and get a slap. Stop working at home.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's to me, it's a bit like, why do we stop that? And it's not, I can't decide what somebody else's dream is. For many people, their dream is to do the same job for the next 30 years until they retire, because that gives them security. That works around their social life, their personal life. It pays the bills, and they'll have a pension at the end of it. That's your dream. Fantastic. That's your dream. So yeah, it's so important to have those kind of conversations. And of course, one of the things I would say to leaders is never underestimate the value of the element of surprise, because very few people are expecting you as their line manager to ask them, what's your biggest dream? And of course, when we create a positive surprise and we make people think differently, that drives intrinsic motivation, it builds engagement. So it's just, that conversation isn't just about this is my dream, it's about everything else that creates in that relationship.
And if that tweaks ever, then I feel now I have the permission to be able to go to you as my manager and say, you know what, I want to talk to you about that. Let's update it. And
yes,
can you help me do something else?
I've bought the house, now I want a family. Exactly. I've got the family, now I want a promotion. Yeah, it's evolution instead of managers feeling under pressure. And I guess we'll talk about this, I'm sure, but I always make the distinction between a manager who puts themselves under pressure to determine people's future for them and to determine that you go in this box on a talent grid. A leader sits down and says, what's your biggest dream? Tell me, I'm interested.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's interesting, just some of the things you've been saying there, because there's you talk about that people can get trapped in work, and they become different in that respect. I can't remember the exact wording of the quote, but it's a famous one from Shawshank Redemption when they talk about, I think it's Red's talking about the walls of the prison, and how it changes over the years, that when you first come in, it's interesting if you think about it like the dream that you're talking about, that when you first come in, those walls are the problem and you want to get over those walls. That's the dream, to get back outside. And when you're in there that long, eventually they become the thing that's keeping you safe, and you don't want to go beyond them. You've looked upon them very differently, and that's what being institutionalized means. The dreams have now gone, and now I feel safe, and it feels like too much to actually try and go after anything bigger than this. And you just reminded me of that when you were talking about it. It's really interesting. And when you talk about kids as well having dreams, I actually put a post on the other day. I think you might have commented on it, actually. The National Record of Achievement. The little book that I found. But it's true. Kids nowadays, they talk about dreams and what they want from life. Whereas I think we filled out a little questionnaire that came back and told us what we were going to be in life. You are going to be a bus driver. There you go.
Yeah.
How the hell has it come out with that?
Yeah. I remember those career talks at high school. And I was being a bit flippant, because I can even now, I just instinctively didn't buy into that kind of stuff. And when you've got somebody who's been in education all their life suddenly giving you advice, and I remember I got quite brave, and it was a lady, actually, a female teacher, and she asked, so whether it was the what do you want to do when you grow up, it probably wasn't. It was probably what do you want to do when you leave education. That was probably the question. Yeah. But just quite flippant, said, I want to play for Man United. And I mean, she was right, because she went, we don't even play for the school team, Tim, so that's not going to happen, is it? And, but really, she didn't go, well, okay, how are you getting on playing for the school team? Well, I don't play for the school team. Okay, so what team do you play for? And instead of having the conversation to maybe suggest, maybe you could look at a coaching career, Tim. Yeah. Maybe you could work in football in a different part of the industry. Yeah. Straight away, it's, your dreams are quashed. Go and get a job. Good luck.
Basically, you're not already living your dream. So what chance have you got of making that dream any bigger?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's mad. I remember at college, with the careers teacher there, when I said I didn't want to go to university, they literally shut the folder and went, okay, Tim, thanks, good luck, and walked off. And not like this is employment, or the thing that I talk to so many leaders about, and often leaders think they don't have permission to think this way. With one-to-one coaching clients or leadership groups, I ask them, what do you enjoy? What do you love? And sometimes I'll say, split it into columns and do, what do you love about being a leader? Mm-hmm. So what do you love about working with people? And also in the other column, what do you love about the technical side of your role? Yeah. And then use that to make a decision for what you do next. Because if the column under leadership is much longer than technical, focus on how you become the leader that you want to be. Focus on how to build relationships. Focus on how to keep progressing, where you can have that environment for you as the leader. If the list of technical is much longer, then maybe you shouldn't be leading people. Yeah. Maybe you should be the subject matter expert. Maybe you should work more on projects. Or if you're saying, well, it's longer now, but I want my leadership to be longer. Well, now you've got a clear view on what you should do. Yeah. And what we're doing is encouraging people to say what to enjoy. Because what's fascinating is, if I went back to school or college and they asked me, what do I enjoy? It would have been along the lines of, I love writing. Yeah. I love working with people, with the drama and all that sort of stuff in education. I love being creative, not from an artistic point of view. I love getting a blank piece of paper and creating something. Yep. I love helping people. I like working as part of a team. They're all the things that I do in my own business. I write learning experiences. So you have to write them from scratch. Yep. I write blogs. I create training materials. I've created my own tour. Yep. And clearly I work with people. So actually, I'm doing what I enjoyed in education. It's just that no bugger could tell me that this is the opportunity back then. Yeah. So
because they didn't think about, it wasn't about what skills and what do you enjoy. It was more about what's the actual talent process that you have at the minute, and what does that map to? So what's that? You enjoy kicking a ball? All right. Well, no, you're not. you're not going to get to that. So what else do you enjoy? What else can you do? Sorry, rather than what do you enjoy? It was a mum's old friends when I was doing my A levels at the time, and I didn't know which ones to pick, and he was kind of going, "What do you want to do?" I was like, "I just don't know," and he just said, keep doing what you enjoy, and you've got more chance of enjoying what you end up doing."
Yeah.
And I thought, at that time, that meant a lot to me, that did, because not many people said that to you as a kid. It's like, you must have an idea what you want to do, and you must follow the courses and education to get you to that point. So it was really refreshing.
Yeah. It's something, I mean, I do feel quite strongly about the disparity between education and employment, and there's a danger of it getting further. And I think we do focus too much on, if you do this subject, that's the career, or that's the opportunity, or you should go to university and do that. I mean, looking back now, when I started college in 1994, when Oasis and Britpop were about to take over the world. So I had the best teenage years anyone's ever had, apart from the 60s.
Yeah.
Just the best time ever. And that was a time when teenagers were, again, having that opportunity to find themselves. So I lived that, and I can see it shaped me as a person in my future. But when I look back, I started college. So the subjects I chose at college, I was doing my maths resit for GCSE. It took me 2 years there, I've admitted it. And then alongside that, my A levels when I started were English, IT, and business studies.
Wow.
I went to about 3 IT lessons, and after she bored me to death for an hour and a half about binary code, I walked out, turned to my mate next to me and said, "I'm never going back there ever again." Dropped IT, replaced it with media studies. Loved media studies. I loved the fact it challenged me, because you were learning different things about how to make films and everything else. Loved that. It combined well with English. And I dropped business studies after a year because I found it totally boring. And I just couldn't connect to it at all. And when I look back now, that aligns with what I do now. IT, I'm not into the detail. I'm not someone who's a perfectionist or the minutiae of it. Technology should work for me before I think that I should work for that. And the same with business studies. When people ask me, why did you set up your own business? More often the response is, because I got sick of working for dickheads. And I got sick of being forced into corporate bullshit. And I make no apologies for saying it that way, because that's just me, the way I talk. So even back as a 16-year-old, I had those intrinsic values and those interests now. And to bring it back to leadership, that's why it's so important to just explore that with people and just help them to gain that self-awareness. The gift of leadership is helping others to understand more about themselves. That's what leads to high performance. That's what leads to engagement and productivity, where people understand more about themselves and they remove the fear, they remove that inferiority complex, they remove imposter syndrome, they stop beating themselves up because this is the job I do. So for me, if we can start to introduce that more, and I've worked with a group this week, actually, we're doing that, and they're embracing it. It's unbelievable.
Brilliant.
These are, by their own definition, hairy arse working class men. It's a senior leadership team. They're all men. Work is done very much on construction sites. I'm not painting a stereotypical picture here. I'm being honest, so you can imagine where the leadership they've experienced. And their HR team have asked me to go in and help them to create a values-led culture. And the first thing I said is, yes, absolutely. However, this can't be about, here's the values, stick them on the wall. Here's the values, 100%. Tell people. And the leadership team have embraced it like nothing else. They've embraced the self-awareness we're raising. They've embraced the responsibility. They've embraced those conversations with their teams where they're asking their teams, what do you stand for? And they're having the conversation saying, I don't just want to lead Tim or a job title. I want to understand your human values. And we're 3 months into a 12-month development project with them, and they're absolutely loving it. And we've all got that self-awareness. Sometimes we just need somebody to come along and help us to draw it out of ourselves.
100%. Just a bit of guidance in there. Yeah, I completely agree with you. The education stuff really rings true for me. That I don't suppose really I had the kind of benefit of the guide, but I went through the stuff that I thought I enjoyed, and like you, it kind of pointed to other things. I did history as a degree because I enjoyed writing about history.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
enjoyed it, understanding
yeah,
characters in
doing the
history.
research and yeah.
Loved all that, but it was through one of the lecturers at the university that I had was a big advocate of IT, and this was, we were talking the late 90s, so it's not the most used thing still at that time. The internet was still relatively new, but he was very keen on it, and he was one of he was the first one there that was getting you to submit things online to him, for him to be able to mark, and it's like, and that started to intrigue me. And as a result, I ended up I did a master's, but I did it in IT, not history. So brilliant. And I really enjoyed that. Like you, there was some of it that was a bit deep, and I went, not so sure I'm going to carry on with that. But what I got from that was exposure and experience in things like user experience and design, user design, and what works and what flows and what looks good, what doesn't.
Yeah.
Which I use now. But as part of that, what I did was I volunteered to do what they called at the time demonstrating. Which was actually just an appalling term for just facilitating learning of others. And what you had was, you had some undergraduates, first year undergraduates that would come in, and as part of having to do something separate to their main course, would do a few hours of IT every week.
Yeah.
And you were there just to help them and guide them. I absolutely loved it. So I gained that one, then came from that, and I went into training. And people look back and go, you did history and an IT and then you went into training. But no, there's a story. It worked for a reason. It mapped like that. And I wouldn't be where I was, on probably less chance that I would have been, had I not taken that journey.
Yeah. It's bonkers if as leaders start to have more of those open conversations, it enables them. What we don't understand enough about generally in the world, if we live a life of, I get an education, I get a job, I go to work, I go home, I have a family, if we run on autopilot, and I'm not criticizing that, by the way, because obviously autopilot brings all of our happiness in terms of having a family, or our interests and everything like that. However, what we don't then naturally find out is what's really going on for us inside in our hearts and minds, and this element of emotional intelligence, because everything that we do comes from our hearts and minds. And as a leader, what we must first try to understand more about is, okay, when I'm leading 3 people or 10 people, instinctively what's happening is I'm creating an environment, because we are all products of our environment. I've still got hair like Liam Gallagher in 1996. In fact, he's behind me here. That's a product of my environment.
Yeah.
And what we must focus on with leadership is saying, right, okay, what do I need to do to make that environment feel engaging to the people who work in it? And this bit that we don't really understand unless we look for it, or somebody comes along and tells us about it, and then we pull on the thread and we find a little bit more about it, as a human, what we're always doing is we're looking out on the world and wanting that world in terms of how it looks back at us, how it sounds back at us, and most importantly, how it feels back at us. We want it to be similar. We want it to feel the same. So, for example, for me, when I'm recording this podcast with you, Rob, instinctively, I feel very comfortable. We talked about what you were wearing, because it's a nice bright colour, so that's cool. I like it when people do that. I can see Superman's cape. I can see a Rubik's Cube. We know that we share similar thought. We started by sorting cricket out, and cricket in the 1990s anyway. So that it motivates me to be at my best for this podcast. It motivates me to stay connected with you beyond. And that's because the environment that we spend for 2.5 hours or whatever, however long we're going to be together on this, for the afternoon, because we'll sort out everything else by when we finish the recording.
Yes.
And that's the bit that leaders, we're not naturally made aware of. So what we do is create an environment where I've got authority and I tell you what to do, and I have to take the pressure, and I have to chair every meeting, and I have to respond to every email, and I have to do what my boss does, who starts work at 6 o'clock and doesn't have a lunch, because we think, because we're on autopilot, we think that that's the environment we should be creating. And the reality is, it's about enabling and developing leaders to have the ability to, first of all, create the environment based on their own intrinsic values, and then start to explore that with their team. Because then if I understand that in my team, the most important thing to Dave is that he can work the hours he's expected to work, not under pressure to do overtime, because the most important thing for him is his family and his personal hobby. Great. I know that about Dave now, and I understand why. Actually, if I'm also leading Rob, who's really ambitious and he's working towards having a family, he's working towards buying the house, he's working towards my job or that position of responsibility somewhere else. Right. Well, now I know how to lead Rob. Now I know the conversations with Rob. Now I know the opportunities to open up to Rob. And I can maybe share with Rob, this is how it's going to work across the team. So that's what Dave's going to focus on. What are the opportunities for you if we know that that's the rest of the team? So what you're doing is creating that ability where every time somebody goes to work, whether that's walking through a door or opening a laptop screen, as coronavirus has created for most of us now, it's that thought of, when I open that, when I walk through that door, the values align with mine.
Yeah.
And I know I can be myself. I know I'm going to have to work hard. I know I'm going to be put under pressure. I know I'm going to have to continue to develop my technical skills and all of those other things that are important. We'll have to hit targets. However, I know I'm valued for being me, because nobody should have to walk through a door every morning to an environment that conflicts with their values.
Yeah.
So it's helping leaders to uncover that little bit of a secret about how we really work, so they can create that environment, because then I'll give you discretionary effort, then I'll use my initiative, then I'll build relationships, then I'll challenge you in the right way, then I'll deal with conflicts, then I'll work as hard as I possibly can, because I recognize that you value me for being me, and you create the environment that for me the world feels, sounds and looks the same as I want it to.
You're spot on. I think that, you mentioned before there an example of a leader going, I don't have to chair every meeting. And I've been in the presence of leaders that have gone, all right, I'll make that first step. I don't. But what they've not done is what you've been talking about there. They've not then got to know their people. Instead, what they've done is, right, what we're going to do is we're going to rotate the chair in this meeting, and everyone's going to have a go of it. And you're quite right. What 2 or 3 or 4 or half a team may not really not want to, and they actually panic about it. They're actually up all night thinking, oh my God, I've got to chair that meeting tomorrow. And you're like, no, you're making it worse, not better.
You're absolutely right. I remember when I started to learn more about emotional intelligence, and when for me I started to make that shift from the command and control manager and the micromanager to the leader who creates the environment for empowerment. That's what we did at a team meeting. Every month we had a team meeting and we presented the same figures. We did the same things, and no wonder people were frigging bored. But to me, it was like the best meeting ever. And we're telling you this information, and nobody else does this. And they're all looking at me going, this is the same thing. So what we did was we stopped and asked them, what are you getting out of these meetings? What would you like to be different? And also tell us who would like to have a go at chairing them. Because actually, I'd like to have 5 or 10 minutes here and then get out, because this is about you, not about me. Yeah. And I was amazed that, probably the least inexperienced members of the team were going, I want to go at that, and I'd like to talk about that. And then other people were going, this will help with my development. Yeah, you had a few people who were like, I'm not doing that. I don't even know why I come to these meetings. That's fine. That's your choice. Yeah. So when you give them that choice, I remember it was a great moment for me when I then started to go into those meetings. I'd maybe introduce them and then I'd leave. And then what they would do is say, well, we want you to come back at the end, Tim, because then we can ask you some questions and we can tell you what we're going to do. And I was like, yeah, brilliant.
Awesome.
And that power of, I remember somebody coming up to me and going, all your team are in that meeting room down there in a very accusatory, what are they doing and why aren't you in it? And I was like, no, it's there. It's the team meeting. And they were like, why aren't you in it? And I remember just quite bluntly going, because it's the team meeting, not my meeting. Yeah. And it created a much better response. And that led to, I remember having a conversation with a particular lady there who famously called me she called me a shithouse in her appraisal. Wow. Appraisal, yeah.
I never knew ratings went to that level.
I know, yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shithouse.
Yeah, crikey, I'll never forget it till the day I die. But I probably deserved a little bit of that. But the reason I'm sharing that is that was her attitude, that was her approach. She did a good enough job. She had an opinion on everything, and the world was against her because every time she applied for a promotion, she got turned down. It was everybody else's fault. As I started to develop and I started to turn the environment, I could then have the conversation. I could say, so Lynn, what do you think you're doing that stops you getting that promotion?
Yeah.
And then she'd be really honest and she'd share, I know why I don't get it, but I'm not going to change. And then we could have a conversation about, okay, well, what's going to work best? Because if you're not going to change, what's that going to mean for the jobs that you're applying for? And she'd be like, well, I'm not going to get them, am I? And then we had the conversation where she stopped applying for jobs because she didn't really want them. It was about making a point because she'd been there the longest. And, we built that relationship where the open, instead of being called a shit house, the open conversations were very, very frank in terms of, I really didn't agree with the way you behaved yesterday.
Yeah.
That's not going to sit well with us. And she would talk to us about it. Lynn would share her frustrations. And we got to the point where we had a relationship where she continued to do a good enough job and was an important member of the team, but also to the point where we agreed, that's what you're going to do. I'm not going to accept that you sit there and moan about it. Yeah. I'm not going to accept that you sit there and challenge every decision. And she accepted that because we'd been through those conversations probably over 3 to 6 months where she felt valued, she felt listened to. That's all I did, really. I just chose to listen to her.
Well, that's it, the right questions at the right time. And if you don't succeed the first time, finding a different question that unearths the reasons behind the behaviours, the decisions. Because sometimes you do, it's going back to the start of this conversation. We talked about being institutionalized and getting trapped in those worlds that, we've all been there. We've trapped in our own worlds and we can't see the wood for the trees anymore. Someone just says something to you and you go, oh my God, yeah, I am thinking that and I am doing that. Right, yeah, and it's not going to change because I keep doing it. And you know what? It's either complain about it or don't complain about it.
Yeah.
I know, I get it now, yeah.
Yeah, I was working with a group recently, and one of the leaders who was a bit younger, shall we say, in the group, and maybe a little bit experienced, and he turned around and we were working around emotional intelligence, in particular the choices you can make as a result of that. And he said that at the end of the day, he said, what I've really learned today, he said, is I never knew I could choose how I respond to my thoughts and feelings. Yeah. He said, I literally thought whatever goes on in here and in my head and my heart, that's what I should do. And he gains that for himself. I didn't drill that into him. I didn't tell him that. I create the environment where they can develop themselves. And I think that's a big thing that we sometimes miss in leadership development. It is creating that environment where people develop themselves and they realize, I can choose to decline a meeting. I can choose not to chase people 5 minutes after I've sent them something. I can choose to ignore a phone call. I can choose to go in a meeting and ask open questions instead of just divulging loads of information that nobody cares about.
Yeah.
And, for me, I feel very lucky that the journey I had through my leadership development and getting into L&D, I now have the opportunity to work with other leaders to help them to make those choices. And, for me, I don't really get inspired by a CEO who has turned Ford Motor Company into a profit-making business, or a CEO that was already a millionaire and they invested loads more money to create another business. That doesn't really inspire me. It's the C-suite member who's worked up to that.
Yeah.
And then because they've made positive choices, it's the middle manager, as they tend to get termed, or the senior leadership team like I work with this week. It's the aspirational leaders who come from whatever background it is, whether they've got a degree or they've worked up from the shop floor. It's a very old-fashioned way of saying it. Who then start to go, oh yeah, I can do things differently.
Yeah.
I can change things. One of the most inspirational people I will ever meet was one of my first coaching clients, a director in a big organization who'd been there for many years, and he lost his way. He just cut himself off. He'd go into work, shut the office door, and he'd cut himself off from that. He lost sight of why he worked in this organization. He was threatening to quit. He just didn't know what he was going to do. And, thankfully it's the organization that instead of reaching for the P45 and, destroying this man, they said, we'd like to get you a coach to help you with your leadership for 12 months. And there was a particular bit of feedback that prompted it, and they supported him. And over those 12 months, he went back to him
Yeah.
And you know, I still speak to him now, and he said, you know, I'm now the lad that I grew up being. My office door's open, and on my office door there's a wheel that we spin every week that somebody wins a prize off. And
how amazing is
he's
that?
now coaching and mentoring apprentices. And it was only because he lost sight of himself.
Yeah.
And he lost sight of the ability to make those choices in terms of how he responds to the world around him. And, you know, he did things that, as his coach, blew my mind. So when we talked about the relationships with the team, and he was able to create this outcome for himself, he was like, I need to ask them what they want from me. I need to ask my team what they need, because I've never asked them. Not only did he do that, he got them to do it in writing, in a letter. Wow. He asked them to write him a letter, and he wrote them a letter first, sharing, this is the journey that I'm going on. This is what I can see I want to change. And he got them to write back to him, handwritten letters. Right. He shared them with me in the coaching sessions. I was just like, amazing. You've blown my mind. Normally people do that face-to-face, and sometimes they do it collectively because they haven't got the balls to do it one-to-one, or they do it one-to-one, but then haven't got the balls to bring it out in the team. He got it so open, and he has completely changed his view on leadership, and he's reignited his purpose, because he was able to go through self-awareness, go back to, this is me. Yeah. This is what I stand for. I can do that as a leader. And he's now having those conversations, and the feedback that triggered the intervention 12 months later, when he got the same feedback, was like off the scale. Yeah. And that wasn't the end goal. However, that was the tangible measure of, well, actually, you're down here as a 1-star manager, or whatever the term is. Now you're even above a 3-star manager. And all he did, that's a dreadful way of saying it. What he did was focused on his self-awareness and having conversations that build relationships. Yeah.
But I think, you know, in some ways, I think it's right to say all. I know, because I used to say that in a previous role, that a lot of these things that we talk about, they are very, very simple. But that doesn't mean they're easy.
No.
And quite often, they're quite the opposite from easy. They're very, very difficult. But if you write them down, they're very, very simple. And conversely, a lot of the things that we do we make not simple. But we put them in very easily. There you go. We've easily put that process in, and it's complex as ever.
Oh God, yeah.
No, we need to switch this. we talked about leaders there, and we talked about emotional intelligence, sort of threaded through all of that. Let's kind of bring it back to its simplest point. What do you actually define emotional intelligence as being? So, you know, if I was to, because I think most people have kind of Googled it now, and they see the same sort of threads coming through. How do you define it? What do you view as emotional intelligence being?
For me, emotional intelligence is your ability to make positive choices. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is it shapes how you respond to the world around you. So it's something that I taught to, and in particular one of my keynote talks really focuses around this, is that the greatest power we have as a human being is the ability to choose a positive response to our thoughts and feelings. Yeah. And that, for me, is where that emotional intelligence really plays a part for us. Yes, it's everything else. I can talk about Daniel Goleman till blue in the face, because I love that man. Mm-hmm. Anybody who wants to know anything about emotional intelligence, follow Daniel Goleman, read his book. For me, he's so inspirational. And it's everything that he's identified. It's the self-awareness, the social awareness. I feel awful reading these off as if they're insignificant. It's the self-management, the regulation, and then that relationship building. And relationship management, because that's what drives empathy and motivation, and it's what enables us to manage our behaviors. So the reason why I focus on it being your ability to make positive choices is because what we're doing all the time is reacting to the world around us, and our brains don't work any different to they did to cavemen years ago. I'm not going to go into the fight and flight. Everybody knows about that. You know, the chimp-minded Steve Peters. Everybody knows about that. Yeah. But the reason I reference that is our brain still works in the same way, that it scans for threats and rewards. Now, what's very different for us now, for let's just say, I suppose with coronavirus, it's changed a little bit, but I would say in a normal world, God, I hate saying that, but in a normal world that everyone can relate to, 99% of the human population, every day, the brains are scanning for threats and rewards that are not as threatening as they used to be.
Yeah.
So the reason the human brain does that is because a caveman had to look out for a lion, that was going to eat him, or another tribesman that was going to kill his family. Thank God we're not in that situation anymore.
Yep.
Except now, your brain is scanning for threats of people are going to think my presentation was shit. People are going to deny me a promotion. People are going to judge me for what I put on social media. And in reality, it actually creates a stronger emotional reaction for us than actually being faced with physical danger. Because physical danger, your brain responds like that and you fight or you run away.
Yeah.
When you're in that moment, you ruminate over it. You spend days and weeks losing sleep over it. It becomes part of everyday life where you wake up with that dread of, I'm not good enough, I'm not happy in this job, I'm not happy in this relationship. So we've still got that same way of neural processing that we've always had. Now, obviously, cognitively, we've developed over the years. That's why human beings are the master race on Earth. I know it's really hard to accept that sometimes with the way we behave. However, that's why we're the master
toilet
race
roll
on Earth.
fights in the supermarkets.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah. That's a different kind of podcast. And it's because our cognitive function is developed that we can choose response to our thoughts and feelings. So you don't see a lion in an airport. You don't see a dolphin out of water. A dolphin doesn't know it's wet, and all those kind of analogies that we've all learned from the different books.
Yeah.
So we've got to understand that that's what we're faced with on a daily basis. And where emotional intelligence kicks in is starting to take control. And I stress the word control because emotional intelligence helps us to bust a myth of leadership as well. So what I mean by control is controlling ourselves. And I mean that in a positive way.
Yeah.
So sometimes when we become a manager, we think, I now control everybody. No, you cannot control or change another human being. If you ever do that, it's to that other person's detriment. It's called brainwashing. It's called manipulation. The only person that we can control and change is ourselves. And the way we do that is by growing our self-awareness to the point where, okay, I recognize those thoughts and I recognize those feelings, and I'm going to choose how I respond to it. So we go from a reaction, which is the manager who shouts at people, that belittles people, that ruins relationships, that only cares about the results.
Yeah.
That forces people onto Microsoft Teams calls 10 times a day, that builds zero relationships. That's because they're reacting, because inside the brain's telling them, don't trust that person. Make sure they've done it, because if you don't, your boss is going to bollock you. And if you don't do that, you're going to look stupid and you want to look like a good manager. And also that fear of, that internal sense of, I don't really know why I do this job.
Yeah.
And I'm in a situation now where I'm on 40, 50 grand a year and I've got to keep going because I've got a mortgage and a family that I love. And if I stop doing it, I ain't going to earn that money. And actually, if I do that, do I look like a failure? Because I've now got the top level of company car.
And what's that going to look like on my CV if there's a gap and I'm not going to be able to talk about that in the next interview? What's my answer?
Yeah.
Dead interesting.
Because the world tells me success is power and money. The world tells me that this is what I should do. And the environment closer to home in the organization tells me I should have authority and I should make sure that I know what my team are doing. So that's reacting. That's coming home at work at night and bringing all your stresses home and not spending time with your family. I've been there. I know what this does to people. And the flip side is emotional intelligence will get you further in life than anything else, because it enables you to recognize that and choose a positive response. And choose a response that aligns with what you stand for.
Yeah.
So when you go to bed at night and your head hits the pillow and you just fall into that magnificent sleep and everything in the world feels right, that's because you have behaved in a way that aligns with what you stand for. It's intrinsic motivation. The stress and the anxiety and the sleepless nights that I've had a lot of over the years is because your brain is constantly saying, and it doesn't articulate it this way because it's thinking about the consequences of the day after.
Yeah.
What your heart and mind are really saying is, the way you spoke to that person today is not you. The fact that you blew up at that person, the fact that you stayed late for no other reason than you're in a bad mood and couldn't be arsed facing your wife, that's not you. That's not you, Tim. What you're doing, mate, it's chipping away at you. But the thoughts are processed in, what if that team member doesn't do this? What if my boss checks up on this? What if the customer wants this? What if? So then we think that's the problem. And the opportunity, because the problem is the challenge and the challenge is the opportunity, is to start to recognize those thoughts and feelings and start to be able to choose a positive response and start to be able to go, what I can focus on is, first of all, leading myself and then create those relationships and really start to put that emotional intelligence into practice, because everything we do is driven by our emotions. Your instinctive reaction to the world triggers an emotion that triggers your thoughts and feelings that become your behaviors. And where I focus with leaders is getting them, first of all, to create the best version of them that they want to be, and then understanding the steps that they can take to be that version of themselves. And, more often than not, the best version of themselves, it's always about their intrinsic values. It's always about what they stand for. And then it's also aligned to what they want to achieve in that role. And then what it enables them to do, it enables them to empower themselves through emotional intelligence to work in an environment that might even be toxic. For me, I can recognize that an environment I worked in was the toxicity was off the scale. The culture was lie to everybody, cheat your way to the top, be narcissistic, get rid of people if I don't like the way they look, inappropriate behavior off the scale. And that destroyed my mental health. I suffered with severe depression in that environment. And what literally saved my life, because with my severe depression comes suicidal thoughts. So what literally saved my life was my emotional intelligence, because I was able to take a step back and go, the reason I'm feeling like this is because I'm in an environment that conflicts with me. That behavior is not what I want to be surrounded by. I wasn't blaming that culture because I chose to work there. So it was my choice. And my emotional intelligence enabled me to go, well, I choose what happens next. And I choose to go to work and filter out. So filter out what I don't need, filter out what's a load of crap, what's a load of bullshit, and choose to turn up every day and coach the leaders in that business to the best of my abilities, to facilitate learning experiences and create learning and leadership tools to the best of my ability. And that's my legacy to walk away. It's up to them what they do with it. Knowing that lot, they probably binned it. And whereas if I was on autopilot, I've either then got to live a life of depression and not being a good dad, not being a good husband. That's what, as far as I'm concerned, that's what I was put on earth for, not to earn money. I was put on earth to be a good dad and a good husband and a good brother and a good friend and a good son. I can't do that if I'm bloody miserable at work.
Well, that's your product of environment that you talked about earlier on again. It's amazing how it all blends together, really. I've worked at one of the organisations I worked at, regular as clockwork. Every 6 months there was restructures and redundancies, and so one mistake was in people's heads going, oh my god, is that going to be me on the chair in 6 months' time? So that drove that behavior. But something that you said there I found really, really interesting, that you talked about as you kind of put your head on the pillow at night and those thoughts are there, that we talk about that people aren't self-aware enough and they don't take that moment to actually think about themselves and how they view the world. The way you described it there, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing is that the brain is actually doing that all the time. It's trying to tell you, oh, this is how you feel. You're in conflict here with what you actually believe. And listen to me. And what we tend to do, instead of actually listening, and for want of a better phrase, almost listening to the coach inside, is go, no. I need to carry on because I've got the mortgage and I've got that and I've got this and that's just the way it is. And I'll go back and do it. And that in itself then becomes tremendously exhausting, ignoring it all the time. There was something that I think, I don't know if you saw this the other day, it was an article, it might have been in online on the FT. And it said something like, it talked about Zoom fatigue.
Yeah.
And it's the first time I've thought about it in this way, based on talking to yourself. They said one of the two key factors about Zoom fatigue for them was that you look at yourself on screen.
Oh, yes.
And your brain just is not used to that because you're not able to, you're not blanking it out like you've just talked about before. Your brain's telling you something, you're trying to blank it out and you turn over and you have a drink or whatever it might be. and worst case scenario, some of the things that you've been through yourself there that you were talking about to close it out, it's actually sitting there. And yeah, you can right click on it and turn yourself off, but how many people do? It's exhausting, constantly trying to look at yourself, but filter yourself out, and looking at yourself, filter yourself. And it sounds from what you're talking about, that's exactly what the brain's doing all the time. It's hearing about yourself, but trying to ignore it, but can.
Yeah. It's such a relevant point, and it talks quite a lot of groups about this. And particularly one individual leader was doing some coaching with as part of a wider program today, and we talked about that, and we talked about it from a vanity point of view.
Yeah.
Now, in one sense, from my vanity, it's good that people only see me through a screen, because my lockdown Barney is an absolute disgrace. If we were in a room together, we'd be talking, you'd just be looking at the air and thinking, what are you doing, you scruffy get? So this screen allows me to get over that. However,
and of course, we're both recording this today in our swimming trunks.
Of course, yes. Well, I've got my wife's bikini bottoms on. I don't know about you. Is that not what you do?
Standard practice.
So, I mean, and of course, I've made that point about if we're in a room, look at the air. But if we were in a room together, I'd have gone the barbers and had my haircut.
Yeah.
So that vanity we're so aware of it all the time, and we see what we're doing, our body language, the facial expressions that you wouldn't normally see. So yeah, it turns to self-awareness. And the leader I was talking about, who worked with recently on this, they were talking about the virtual world, and they were talking about the frustration of people not putting the cameras on.
Yeah.
And that's what I asked them is, well, what's going on for that person? And I kept nudging them, because they're a bit like, well, I don't know. Okay, but what do you know? What is going on for that person? And they were able to then go away and have a conversation. And it was exactly that they don't like having the camera on because they can see themselves. And but then they fed back that all the members of the team said, I don't have my camera on because my kitchen's a disgrace, or, you know, I haven't really got anywhere I can sit in my house. So that self-awareness sometimes works against us. And it needs either somebody to have a conversation with themselves and go, everybody else has got rubbish hair or eyebrows off the scale.
What are you trying to say? What are you trying to say to
Sorry,
it's only me that you're looking at the minute and you're saying these things.
Apart from you, obviously, mate.
No, I have, though.
No one else has got nails that they want at the moment. And then I could go, so what, let's embrace it. Or it needs a leader or even a colleague to just raise that conversation of going, well, what can we do to help you with this? Because I would like you to have the camera on in your one-to-ones, because then I can see you and we can engage. I'd really like it if you could put it on in X, Y, and Z meeting, because again, then you can engage and, you know, taking the step to give somebody that feedback of what I'm worried about or the impact it has on me is, I don't know what you're doing behind that camera being switched off. And I trust you because you get your work done. If you're in other meetings with other people, they might be thinking, are you actually here? So what can we do to change that potential impact that you're having, and, you know, that potential reputation? And it needs, like I say, either an individual's ability with emotional intelligence or the leader to prompt that conversation and, you know, start to engage with people to really use that self-awareness from a positive point of view.
It's that courage and vulnerability again to kind of go, well, talk about, you know, you talked about mental health before and your own, to be able to go in that sort of situation, that could go on for 6 or 12 months. And you've got one party going, why the hell do you always not have your camera on? The other person, oh my God, I bet everyone's criticizing me for not having my camera on, but I don't do. And it gets worse and worse and worse and snowballs.
Yeah.
And all it took is the person to go, can we have a chat?
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation about it. Is everything okay?
Yeah. And some leaders I've worked with, they've responded to that. And what they've started to do is say, well, let's not do it on Teams.
Yeah.
In fact, at 12 o'clock, I'll go for a walk where I live. You go for a walk where you live. I'll buzz you on your mobile and let's just have a chat. Have you got some headphones so you don't have to carry your phone in your hand? And they're doing it now. If they've got dogs, they're walking. Excuse me, sorry. They're walking the dogs together, even though they might be 50 miles apart or whatever. So they're starting to change that situation for them. And it's
a bit of luck, that might carry over into the new world again when we come back, because I was a massive advocate of that before all of this. You know, why not go for a walk through town or a walk around a little park near the office or whatever it might be? I mean, you know, without kind of going necessarily, well, I don't know, to the extremes of let's go and play a round of golf together, but why not?
Yeah.
You know, in America, probably 95% of business deals get concluded on the 18th green. So why not?
Absolutely, Rob. And again, what you're doing is you're creating the environment.
Yeah.
So often the environment in work is a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting that I've had enough of, because the last 200 I've had were either really boring or soul destroying, or it represents a bit of a one-way dialogue with my boss. So the minute you ask me to do another one, I don't really want to be there.
Yeah.
Or, you know, when we are in an office environment or in a workplace, that environment is we sit in these on beanbags in open spaces, or I sit in a booth, which was everybody went to booths in offices.
Yeah.
Or we did that brilliant thing 10, 20 years ago when everybody ripped out the walls and put glass on the meeting rooms. That's not great if I'm sat in there having a difficult conversation with my boss that I don't want to have, and you're all staring at me.
Yeah.
So it's the environment. Actually could have go, well, do you know what, we're meeting at 9. What if we meet at work in the car park, get a brew, and we'll just go for a walk around the block?
Yeah.
We'll just go for a walk. You know, if you don't work somewhere that has those facilities, then meet somewhere else, because you're right. If you're in that conversation, you're in that conversation.
Yeah.
If you as a leader turn around and go, I can't do that because we need to be in my office in case my boss wants me, or in case this person wants me. Well, all you've done now is told me that wherever we meet, I'm not important. There's something else that's more important. So actually, if you remove those distractions, one of the things I keep encouraging people to do in the virtual world is your mobile phone. Mine's here, I can show you it's on airplane mode. Put it out of arm's reach.
Yeah.
Don't just have it on airplane mode. Actually put it where you cannot physically reach it.
Yeah.
So remove the temptation. Same with if you're having a meeting with somebody, don't take your phone in.
It's the same as the physical world again, because if I'm exactly the same, I'm on airplane mode. But if I was to sit here with this in my hand, or even if it was visible to me, like if I popped it there and you can visit, you're like, oh, his phone is important to him. Why would he have that there? But in the physical world, when we're actually meeting face to face, that still rings true for me. That if I'm sitting there and people, I'll get this one now and again. If people are going, oh yeah, let me just chat to you there, Tim. They take one earphone off to listen to me. I'm like, well, hang on a minute. Well, you look like you're dying to get back to the headphones rather than talk to me.
I know.
I think there's a massive lesson in that. That's
the self-awareness there, because it's, you know, I learned a really valuable lesson probably when I first started leadership development, really, of it's never how it's intended, it's how it's perceived.
Yeah.
So your behavior and the things that you say, it's how the other person perceives it. You know, and it's about how do we create that environment where I'm clear in what I'm saying, and what I'm doing more often is listening and asking open questions. So I'm not always telling you what to do, you know. And one of the things I talked to a group about this yesterday afternoon about difficult conversations, about saying no buts allowed. So think about the times when somebody says to you, oh, I see where you're coming from. Yeah, I totally, you know, hear what you're saying, but, and then I'm going to tell you something else. Well, actually, what you've just told me is you don't hear what I'm saying at all. You don't see where I'm coming from. You're just saying that to then tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And then I feel like, well, there's not really point saying anything because you're just going to tell me what to do. So I become submissive. The manager becomes a micromanager. So actually, we can step back and say, I don't need to say the word but. What I can say instead, I can say, that's fantastic. I really understand that. I really see where you're coming from. And what I'd like to suggest, or what I'd like us to also talk about, and it's positive influence. That's what we're doing. We're creating positive influence because we're helping people to continue to build on their ideas. Or, of course, the really inspirational leaders listen to that and they say, great, I see where you're coming from. What are you going to do to make that happen?
Yeah.
And then they create their own solutions. And the solution might be, oh yeah, I can't do that, can I? Right, okay, well, what's the alternative? So it's always looking at how you can create
that's pushing
that
again. That's really encouraging that self-awareness again, though, isn't it? They're going to go, okay, can you do that? No, I can't do that. Or I could do that, but I'm going to need this, and this to be able to do that. But I've never thought about it in this one. It's always been, I can't or I can. I've never actually thought about doing it. I mean, and that plays in how many things that people have as dreams and they've never even made one step towards actually achieving them. I mean, we've talked about that then. So emotional intelligence, we've got that, and we know it's important in leadership. And I'd be very surprised if there's many people, if any, listening to this going, that doesn't make complete sense. Why wouldn't we want that? But I think it's also true that we don't have that. Quite often we don't have that in organizations. And I guess, this part of the conversation is there's a little bit around, is emotional intelligence, is it learned? Is it unlocked? What is it? But also, I mean, one of my thoughts around this is that if I was to use the badge for a second, use the label emotional intelligence, I would say that I've known leaders who have completely lacked emotional intelligence in the workplace. Completely been terrible in terms of actually the relations with their people and understanding them and putting them first. But at the same time, knowing of them and sometimes managing to talk to them outside of work, which, by the way, what you just talked about before, this style of work at the minute, you don't get those interactions. You don't get the water cooler chat and the kitchen cupboard chat and all that sort of stuff. But I know through those things and through the things they post on social, I know that actually they're full of emotional intelligence, if we want to call it that, because we can't necessarily call it that at home.
Yes.
I know they're full of that. They're absolutely full of that. So what's the reason, you talk about choice, what's the reason they choose not to bring that into the work environment with them? Or what's stopping it? What's getting in the way and blocking that for leaders?
There's probably maybe three key factors I would think about there. It always starts with you. So the first factor is you internally. And we'll go back to the point I made about the autopilot. So I don't need emotional intelligence because I can sell stuff. I don't need emotional intelligence because I'm building a business. I don't need emotional intelligence because X, Y, and Z. So there's a little bit of, I'm qualified in technical ability. I'm a qualified accountant. I'm a qualified IT director, HR director. So why do I need to deal with people's feelings? Why do I need to build relationships? And because that will get people so far in their careers, it will. So I think there's a little bit of blissful ignorance. There's a little bit of, if I can continue to be successful, then I don't need to change my behavior. So there's no self-motivation to do that. I'll never forget, in an organization I used to work with, they had an annual conference where the best performers were celebrated on stage, and it normally meant being handed a check. And it worked well for them. That was the organization, they were a sales organization. And the first year I went to the conference, this guy was up on stage, and it was a bit like, oh, he's won again, has he? And I was like, I remember turning to somebody, I was like, well, he must be good at what he does if this is the third or fifth year that you just told me he's, they're like, you write his name on that check before he gets it. The first time I asked, turned around to me and went, he's an absolute prick. I was like, what? We're all stood here applauding this guy. And then what he talked about was, in the part of his business, everybody else felt there's no way he could fail. Everybody would, if everybody could move to that location in the UK, they would, because he had no competition. He had the monopoly in that area. So they said he's always going to win. He said, but he's an absolute prick. Ask the people who work for him. He has a higher labour turnover than anybody, because what he focuses on is, every year I go on stage and get handed a massive check and everybody tells me how wonderful I am. So why do I need to change? What are you telling me? I should start talking to people about their dreams when I'm earning all this money. So there's an element of that. Now, I'm using a very extreme example there, of course I am, because the nicest people that you will ever work with choose to not develop emotional intelligence, because they have a very sunny disposition, they can build relationships naturally, and again, the technical ability gets for them what they want from that role. So there's a bit of blissful ignorance. There's a bit of just lacking that self-motivation or self-awareness to really step out and go, how could this be different? To be really honest, that's a big contributor to why a huge percentage of the UK workforce, and I'd suggest the US workforce as well, and probably lots of other countries.
Yeah.
Once they get to sort of 55, they just retire in position, and all they're doing is protecting a pension.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not criticising that. They're happy with their lives. They've just got to the point where, as long as I get to 65 and get my pension, I don't have to change. So why should I bother? Why should I turn up for this coaching or this leadership conversation? So the world allows them to do that. So again, the self-motivation doesn't come out. The second factor is what we talked about before, the productive environment.
Yeah.
The fact that the workplace culture allows them to do that. So we have to choose to change. The group I was talking about before, who creating the values-led culture, one of their senior leaders said something brilliantly this week where he said, we've been ignoring bad behaviour because performance is okay. Yeah. That has to change. And this is a guy who's been in that business 18 years. And, you know, that's them choosing to develop emotional intelligence. That's them saying, we need to change the environment. We need to start evolving our environment so that the business is still successful in 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
So that's a positive example. Unfortunately, there's lots of negative examples where we don't change the environment enough. We don't focus on the culture.
Yeah.
We simply expect people to be told what to do because an amount of money goes in the bank every month. So it's definitely a product of the environment. And, you know, actually, if I work for a narcissistic knobhead and they bark and shout at people, well, I'll make sure the main thing I'll focus on is not being the one that gets barked and shouted at.
Yeah.
So I will go, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir, yes, madam, no, madam, 3 bags full, madam, even though what I'm doing contradicts with what's inside of me. So the environment is a huge factor.
Yeah.
Hence why that's what's got to be the focus for me in leadership development, is create the environment. Even if you're in a toxic culture, you can still create the local environment for your team, because it always starts with you and you always have a choice.
I think that's absolutely crucial, because I think, you know, people talk about, when we talk about vision and values and behaviors, people always look at that on a corporate scale, that's something set by the senior managers for the company. No. What's your vision? What are your team's values? What are your team's behaviors? And they're probably going to fit in and or complement those things, because ultimately I hope that what you do is aligned to what the company's trying to achieve. But at the same time, bring that local, give that energy into that team about vision and values.
Absolutely. That's the environment there, Rob. That's the work I do with helping leaders to be the best version of themselves that they want to be. A big part of that is that local environment, and say, whatever the company values are, if you're looking to have organizational values, and particularly if they've done the work with the behaviors and everything else, great, that's an amazing opportunity. Now take those values and ask your team, so what do we stand for individually and collectively? And how are we going to bring those values to life for us? And we might say, actually, that value just isn't that important to us. Yeah. We'll never disrespect it. We'll never put it, purposely conflict with it. For us to achieve our purpose, these are the 2 or 3 values that are really important. And for us in our team, that's what it means to us. And that's what the leader cultivates. That's what the leader gives feedback on. You know, the more a leader understands what the values are for every individual in the team, or the team values, the more the feedback becomes. So, Rob, when you did that presentation yesterday, it was great. It's just, when you address this person, this is how it made me feel. And what I want to give you feedback on is that behaviour, to me, doesn't show you integrity. And we've talked about how important integrity is to you. So what happened? Yeah. Just talk me through it. Just that was my view. Tell me what happened for you. Yeah. So now I'm talking to your hearts and your mind, and we start to bring that really out. If you're in an organisation that doesn't have values, so what? Talk to your team about what your own values are.
100%.
Just sit down and say, doesn't matter what the values are or are not, what are our values? Right, well, if we're going to build this on trust, that's how we behave. And this is what we hold one another accountable for. Actually asking each other, how do I build trust with you? And it's fascinating, actually, when you work with leaders and you start to introduce this, and they're like, I'm not asking that person that. And you think, I'm going to do that. And then as you continue to work with them, as you continue to help them to develop themselves in terms of confidence, and they have the conversation, and then they come back and go, actually, I've had the best conversation I've ever had. And this person who I used to avoid and I used to dread, I understand now what was going on.
Yeah.
And it just starts to happen for them. It's a journey, bit X Factor-ish. It is a journey. There's single interventions that can have an impact. However, it's a journey.
Yeah.
And that's so you've got the individual, the self-motivation to develop that emotional intelligence. The environment, these are the factors that are part of the blockers, or could be the real releases of that emotional intelligence. And I think what's important before we talk about this last one is, what's unique about emotional intelligence is we all have the ability to develop and apply it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what your IQ is. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter how much you get paid. It doesn't matter what technical ability you've got. If you've got a normal functioning human brain, every single person, whether you're 9 years old or 99, you can develop emotional intelligence. This guy had it in abundance. So Captain Tom Moore, that none of us knew about 12 months ago, and mulled him up because I've got his hero mug. He had emotional intelligence in abundance. Yeah. Maybe he never knew that. Maybe he chose to develop it. So we all have the ability to do it.
Yeah.
And when we start to bring that in to the environment of the individual, then it aligns with what can potentially be the third blocker, which is the approach to leadership development, or perhaps more accurately, I should say, the approach to management development.
Yeah.
And we focus on creating people in roles of responsibility to manage other people. We talked about this before, didn't we? About, nobody wants to wake up in the morning and go, oh, I get to be managed today. And, the only things that need managing are your systems, your processes, the risk, projects. What needs leading is you, other people, your own behaviours and your own performance. And I just think the lines get blurred a bit too often. People need the theory behind leadership. I'm an advocate of the levy being spent on leadership, the apprentice levy. My experience is it's been done well, and that's a great opportunity to understand the theory, understand the history. You talked about before, the sort of academic side of it.
Yeah,
that's a good base level. I learned a lot from that when I first started to develop myself. To me, it becomes a bit of a blocker if that's the only thing we do.
Yeah,
and often organisations think, right, we need to develop leaders, and what they do is they present you with, well, we've got an annual appraisal, we've got a disciplinary process, we've got a grievance process, and my view, what's that got to do with leadership?
Yeah.
Actually, if I'm a leader, I should never need that disciplinary process.
Yeah.
Or I should only need it if someone's punched someone or stolen something, and you've got to then go down that route. I shouldn't be having a disciplinary for somebody's behaviour, because if they behave in the wrong way, I need to deal with it. I need to set the environment where they know that's not acceptable.
Well, kind of what you're talking about is I talk about it as the tactical trio when it comes to leadership development. That if I'm a leader in an organisation, argument's sake, let me put myself on the front line or that middle manager level that we've talked about. I'll normally get guidance, as leadership development guidance from three areas. I will say that I get it from my direct superiors, my line managers, and that'll tend to be around the kind of expectations around business and performance and results and all that sort of stuff. This is what we need you to do. This is your job.
Yeah.
And then I'll get guidance from the likes of HR, which is a lot of the stuff you're talking about now, which is the procedurals kind of stuff and the policy sort of stuff. And these are the boxes you need to tick and when you need to tick them and go through that. And then I'll get the L&D side of it usually, which is the development. So I'm going to teach you how to coach people and have conversations and give great feedback. And the trouble that I recognize when this happens, and so I call them the tactical trio, they don't strategically come together. They're not weaved on the same line. Yeah. So I've got a choice, and you've talked a few times, I think, in this conversation about choice. I've now got a choice as a leader. I can't do all three of these things at the same time. They're not joined up. Which one do I do? Which one do I focus on? Which one do I choose? And 99 times out of 100, people will choose to go and follow their leadership expectations, because that's the one that gets the results. That's the one that gets the wage. That's the one that keeps them in a job. And then the things you've talked about earlier on, that's the one that's going to get my target, keep me here towards my pension, keep me safe in the next restructure. Why am I going to do one of the other ones at the exception of that? And then I'm going to have to explain why I've not done that to my manager. I don't have to explain to L&D why I've not done the coaching. It's an easier route.
It's the path of least resistance. You're absolutely right, Robin. It's I suppose I referred to this as the third sort of potential blocker, is because it comes back to choice. And actually what I realized when I was in-house, when I started by training people on how to give an appraisal, training people on how to run a disciplinary, even though they should never have had to do it anyway, and filling them with theory and filling them with the academic or all the leadership models, is I started to realise that nothing was really changing, because exactly like you just described, they'd go back to the workplace and they'd look and go, well, my manager doesn't give a toss about John Adair. This CEO here is never going to demonstrate situational leadership. Now, those things in themselves have a huge value. However, what we need to do more of is create that learning environment where people make a choice.
Yeah.
So me telling you about John Adair, and I'm not picking on John Adair or situational leadership, there's just things that come off my head.
Yeah.
Because if you've ever done any kind of management development, you've heard of them, definitely.
Absolutely.
I can tell you about that, and I can tell you why it's important and where it came from. That doesn't help me in the moment. That doesn't help me when I get back the day after and miserable Rita and angry Bob are telling me about what went wrong when I wasn't there, and telling me about what, everything. Because now it's a bit like, oh God, now I'll just react because it's easy to do that, actually. And I won't give them feedback on them being miserable and angry. I'll do that in their annual appraisal in 6 months, which by the time I'll have forgotten about it and I don't have to do anything. However, by doing the annual appraisal, I've put a tick in the box, and HR won't chase me. My manager won't chastise me because I've done it. So to me, it's about creating that learning environment where people have a choice, and that's what I focus on. So it's not about gathering lots of skills. So one of the things when I work with, I do some trainer work, and one of the things that I always start that with is asking trainers, what's your job?
Yeah.
When you're with your learners, what's your job? And more often than not, it's, well, I've got to train them, I've got to deliver a course, I've got to do this. And I ask them to consider it in a different way, because then I say, what are you doing to create the motivation for them to do something with it?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Often it's a bit of a blank stare because nobody's ever talked to them about that before.
Yeah.
I was very lucky that my NLP guru did bring this into my awareness. And I always encourage people to, from an L&D point of view, look at it as, my job isn't to just give knowledge and skills. My job is to make people believe that they can do it.
Yeah.
Even if you're training people and assessing them on a forklift truck, your job isn't to tick a safe system of work and say they've passed. Your job is that when they leave that interaction with you, they believe they can safely operate a forklift truck.
Yeah.
They believe that they can operate that at the optimal production level that the organisation is asking them to do.
Yeah.
And that then doesn't mean that every trainer needs to turn into a motivational speaker or anything. It's about how you present that information.
Yeah.
It's about inviting questions. It's about being clear on people that one of the most important things when you leave this experience is that you choose one thing that you're going to do differently tomorrow. What's the one thing that you're going to do? That's often the question I ask. Yeah. What's the one thing you're going to do tomorrow? And I talk to them about making choices. So it's not about being effective. It's about making a choice to be an effective communicator.
Yeah.
It's about making a choice to plan and prioritize effectively. It's about making a choice how to chair a meeting, how to deliver a presentation. What I really, really learned, maybe the hard way, was through all those years when I was gathering all those hours in terms of facilitating learning in-house, was that's what stood out. You've got to allow people to make a choice and raise that awareness of, right, when I'm delivering a presentation, I know the structure is important. I've learned some skill. I know and I've been on a PowerPoint course with somebody else other than Tim, because Tim can't do systems training. So I've got the technical, I've got the skill.
Yeah.
What I need to do now is choose to be the one that stands up and presents at the team meeting. I need to choose to be the one that has 10 slides instead of 100.
Yeah.
I can choose to be the one that says, I'm sending you all the data before the meeting.
Yeah.
What I'm going to present on is, this is what it means.
Yeah.
And I'm going to stand up and ask you a question as to, right, well, this is my IT performance. Rob, how does that impact on you in HR?
Yeah.
And actually, marketing, what's this doing for you? Because if we're not answering the service tickets as quickly, you can tell I've never taught in IT, worked in IT, because now I'm stumbling through service tickets. But if we're not responding in the service level time that we said we will, how does that impact on you when you've got a last minute campaign to get 2,000 followers on social media for the brand? It's making that choice to do that. So that's where, for me, is with Enthuse, the huge focus is creating that environment where leaders can choose that for themselves. Now, don't get me wrong, I have to, and this is what my coach works on with me, I have to prepare myself to be confident every day, where I have to go, they will choose what they'll do with it.
Yeah.
I can't take that pressure on. And I think sometimes that's where learning can be less effective as we want it to be, because we put ourselves under too much pressure, that when that manager leaves this interaction, they go and do an effective appraisal, that they go and have a conversation, because we think, but if they don't, it comes back on me. So then we go too hard into, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. You know, I'll never forget when and it was an appraisal. And by the way, my view on annual appraisals is that you can shove them up your arse. It needs to be about inspiring performance. It needs to be about conversations. It's not about the bloody form. And I'll never forget when, in an organisation I was in, that, by the way, the talent development team that I was part of had nothing to do with the appraisal process. It was in a different part of the business. You know, typical fogginess of an org chart that somebody else says, no, we're doing that. And it came out, it was an identikit annual appraisal. They communicated it in the typical way of, they sent an email out, they invited you to come to these short sessions where you were told what to do.
Yeah.
And then they did that brilliant thing that when they realised it was a load of crap, they dumped it on us because we were responsible for leadership development.
Yeah.
So they just dumped it on us by telling the CEO and the HR and the C-suite, no, they need to deal with that. And so I then faced, for probably 6 months, the HR director at the time would go to a board meeting every Friday. And every week I'd do my weekly L&D report, my weekly talent development report that nobody ever read. But I had to do it because it was a tick in the box.
Yeah.
And every Friday morning I'd get the same phone call from the HR director, who was all in a tiz, who hadn't read my report. I'm going to the board meeting. Dave's going to ask me about this. Tell me the figures. And at first I'd read them off for him. And then I got a bit brave. And then I'd go, well, if you open your email, you've got the report there, the figures.
Yeah.
And then I got even braver and started to say, so what's coming from these conversations? Because surely the fact that people are doing the appraisals isn't what's important.
Yeah.
Are we asking senior leaders what's coming out of the appraisals?
Yeah.
Well, and do you know what his response was? This is the HR director. Well, what comes from it, Tim, is they send the forms to my team. So they said, and what do your team do with those forms? We put them in the personnel files.
Brilliant.
Then what happens? Well, nothing, because they've done the appraisal. You know, you can imagine. So, and in my head, when I reflected on that, I sat there and realised, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Who gives a shit that they've hit a number for doing an appraisal? What we need to care about is what comes from it. And this was a business that had high labour turnover. The engagement scores were rubbish, basically, you know, it was basically zero. We had leaders who were inappropriate, who were bullying people. But as long as they put a number in a box to say that they'd done the 20 appraisals that they should have done, nobody cared. Then I got even braver off. And he stopped ringing me because he got the point of, I've sent you the report.
Yeah.
So for 3 weeks running, I sent him the same report. I didn't change anything. I didn't change the date. I didn't change the numbers. I didn't check. My boss proper went off Reddit before it. But I said, I'm sorry, but somebody has to say enough is enough.
I'm proving a point here now.
Yeah, I mean, there was a bit of that, and people encouraged me with that. It was just that bit of, oh, no one's reading this report.
Yeah.
He's telling the figures, but no one cares.
Yeah.
And eventually that HR director left. He was bloody incompetent anyway, but eventually we started to turn it around, and eventually we were the ones talking to the C-suite, and we started to look them in the eye and say, this is what's been happening, and this is what we want to change, and what we want to do is create outcomes from it. And we started to turn the tide. And so that again comes back to this blocker sometimes of the way we approach development, because it comes too much of put a tick in the box, tell them about this, tell them about that. Well, you can tell people all you want. It doesn't create motivation for them to do it. I mean, why do you think the UK is still in lockdown?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the only reason. It's a contributor.
Yeah.
Because people are still breaking the rules. People are still not following guidelines because all you've done is tell them what to do. Yeah. There's no engagement. There's no understanding for individual circumstances. I get it. It's a pandemic. How the hell have you got the time to do that? But it's a huge sign of what's going on for us.
No, I agree. I've said in the past that the role of HR tends to be, and it shouldn't be, by the way, but tends to be to tell managers what to do and when it comes to things like that. Whereas really what the role of HR should be is be there to support managers when managers need you, and they need that guidance and support to figure something out or to do something with their teams.
Yeah. Do you know, there's a HR manager I worked for in an organisation. I'm going to name him because I love them. Stuart Fairburn, his name is. I lost contact with him actually because he left the organisation before me. And this was before I was in L&D. So it was when I was operational manager.
Yeah.
And he made me think differently about HR, and I took it into working in that environment. And he would say to me as an operational leader, Tim, I'm one of the last people you should ever want to ring.
Yeah.
He said, and I'm definitely one of the last people that you want knocking on your door. And what he did was help me to see HR is there to help you to create the environment. And actually everything that we give you as guidance is there to help you through that.
Yeah.
And what he would encourage me to think is, Tim, if you think you need to come to me for help in leading your team, I want you to stop and go, what am I not doing as a leader?
Yeah.
What am I doing to create that conversation of me ringing HR and going, I really need to know what I should say to this person who's just called me a shithouse in an appraisal.
Yeah.
And he made me think completely differently about it and really encouraged me to create the environment. Looking back, that's probably where that thought first started to appear. And I've took that into my later organisations and roles where, as HR, let's be there to support them. Let's not tell them what to do. Let's encourage leaders to have the conversation so that we don't have to waste time in disciplinaries going, so, Lynn, why did you call Tim a shithouse? Because, funnily enough, when I went to Stuart with that, because I did stop that meeting in that moment and say, I'm going to HR, that's what I did. I mean, I told you a story later about how we rebuilt that relationship. And Stuart's answer was, well, what are you doing to make her call you a shithouse?
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
But what he basically said was, okay, Tim, we can do a disciplinary if you want. Yeah, there's a case, a bit of inappropriateness. You won't get anything out of it. You might get a verbal warning. He said, what I can pretty much guarantee is I'll then be having a conversation with you because she'll raise a grievance against you.
Yeah.
Because she thinks you're a shithouse.
And then it's going to be unfixable from there on.
Yeah.
And I think you're right again. Rewind about half an hour and we're talking about just have that conversation for a second. The amount of times, again, I'll keep the names out of it, but the amount of times when someone's come under fire in the organisations that I've been working at, and I've been the one that's gone, just hang on a second. I'm not saying this person's not to blame for something, but what is it about the environment and their leader? What has that environment or their leader done or not done for them to think that was acceptable?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And has anyone actually gone to them to start with and gone, why did you do that in that way?
Yeah.
Or are we all just pointing at it going, well, that was obviously wrong and that's obviously the reason they did it?
Yeah. It's the perceptions, isn't it? So that person's perception of me in that moment was that I was behaving in that way. And that was her way of articulating it and getting her thoughts and feelings out. And yeah, you're right. It's about being able to stop and say, well, what am I doing? And I think one of the big things that, particularly emotional intelligence helps with, because it allows you to make those positive choices, is it allows you to see that what you're actually leading are perspectives.
Yeah.
So you're not leading Tim, Rob, Rita, Sue, and Bob too. You're not leading software developers,
What a
HR
film.
administrators, manufacturers. Sorry, I'm showing my age there, aren't I? You're leading that perspective of when they come into work, this is how they feel about that organization.
Yeah.
This is how they feel about you.
Yeah.
So the first step is to understand that perspective. And don't forget, a lot of them perspectives come from where they've worked before.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I've had a really amazing leader where I've been for the last 5 years. I've come to work here because it's progression. And now I expect all those same things from you.
Yeah.
And if you don't, my perspective is you're not as good as my old manager.
Yeah.
Or if I've had a really bad leader, a bad manager, I'm looking out for the signs that you'll be the same. So if you do anything, or there's even just a tiny nuance that I think you're being the same, I'm going to get defensive.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not going to build that relationship because I think you're going to make me feel like the last person did. So it's helping people to understand what those perspectives are and recognize that, you know, I say this when I'm facilitating and also in inspirational talks. I say, you know, if we take an inspirational talk, for example, when we were allowed to talk at conferences, and I do a keynote talk, and I'd say, look, there's 250 people in here. You're all hearing the same thing. You're all seeing the same thing. By the end of my talk, there'll be 250 different perspectives of what's just happened.
Yeah.
And that's what you're leading. So the more you can engage with people to understand that perspective and help them to understand your own perspective, and of course that starts from self-awareness. Then, so the model that I work with emotional intelligence is it starts with engage, and that's all about self-awareness. It always starts with you. So you have to get first your self-awareness, then start to help others to develop that self-awareness. So you're building up a picture of those perspectives. Then it moves into inspire. And this is where you develop, it's a mindset for me, because you're developing a mindset where you can self-regulate effectively. You can make positive choices. You can choose not to dictate at a team meeting, and you can choose to create an open environment because I can recognize the thoughts and feelings and choose a positive response. Then it's your social awareness in Inspire as well. So a mindset is that you start to explore that with other people. You know, you start to see that that's somebody's behavior, instead of judging them for it, instead of chastising them. Like when we were talking before about people cameras on or off, the first thing I'm going to do is check in what's going on for you, what's really happening behind the camera. So I'd start to build that social awareness, and I can build that into how I lead, because I know that if I've got to talk about redundancies, this particular member of the team might get worried very quickly. So I can deal with them in that. You know, you build that awareness of what's going on around you. And then the final step is enthuse. And that's all about relationship management. It's all about building a relationship with the person, not the job title. That's where your motivation comes out. That's where empathy now exists, because you focus on, I've employed Rob, I want to build a relationship. I'm employing Rob because he's good at what he does. I'm employing Rob, even if it's this is a job organisation where I used to work, I'm employing Rob to glue wooden dowels in kitchen cabinets for 12 hours a day. He knows how to do that. And if he doesn't, we'll train him. So what I want to know is why Rob is doing that job and what he needs from me. And what can I do so that Rob glues those dowels in a kitchen cabinet to the best of his ability? And he doesn't turn up to work every day going, I hate this job. I'll just stick that one in without any glue. Sod this, I'll put 3 in instead of 4. Because down the line, that gets delivered to a customer and it don't get fitted. And
well, it's connecting all the dots again, and it's the classic example of I've said this a few times on a few of the episodes. I think it's the example of the janitor at NASA again. What did you do? Just you sweep floors?
JFK,
you know, taking shortcuts only affects the sweeping of the floor, or are you actually trying to get a man on the moon, in which case your shortcuts have a massive impact going forward. And if you've said that, I mean, what I'd encourage anyone listening to this, I think your advice earlier on around really think about one thing on the back of this podcast that you'd like to do differently or try, because I think experimentation is a massive thing. And be clear about that. You know, if you're trying something different, tell people what you're going to be trying and the reasons that you're trying it and what they might expect that's different from it. And so they're not just going, what the hell's going on here? What's Tim doing today? What's this about? Try and set those expectations. And,
Yes.
and if it doesn't work, try something else. That's cool.
Yes.
If based on your experiences, for those that might think, I'm not quite sure where I might start or what I might do first, is there one that tends to jump out the most from the leaders in the sessions that you've delivered in the past that most people say that I think that's what I'm going to try and do first? Or what would be your advice to maybe just try and do first to start this journey of becoming a little bit more conscious of your emotional intelligence work?
I would suggest it always starts with you. It's the bit that stands out is building that self-awareness. So asking yourself, what do you stand for? And really helping yourself to understand what creates that intrinsic motivation and to continue to do that. Because if I answered, what do I stand for as an 18-year-old when I got my first full-time job, it would be very, very different to what I stand for now. The core of it remains the same, and I can see trust, integrity, honesty has always been hugely important to me. The bigger picture in terms of what you stand for, your map of the world, your influences, what you want from the world, because that's part of what you stand for, it changes over time. So that's what I encourage everybody to do, is to really be clear on what it is you stand for, because that's the only thing that you are accountable for every single day, is living up to what you stand for. That's what your friends want from you. It's what your family want from you. It's what your team want from you. It's what your customers want from you. And the more we focus on being accountable for that, the greater our technical ability becomes, the higher our level of performance becomes, the higher our self-esteem becomes, the more confidence we have to try new things, to have a different conversation, to present differently, to decline that meeting, to stop working 12 hours a day and not having a dinner. Because we start to see it from how our hearts and minds are naturally scanning the world, and start to be able to stop and go, actually, I've got to stop laughing at that person's inappropriate jokes just because he's the CEO, because I hugely disagree with it. And I need to stop slagging people off for being a moaner. And I need to tell them, you really come across like you moan a lot. What can we do to help with that?
So what's behind it? Talk to me.
So it always starts with you. That's certainly the big part of my journey. And then that leads to what you were talking about there in terms of that confidence to do things differently and try things. I'm a big believer in the Han Solo approach. There's only one way to find out. So do something different, try something new. This isn't about quitting your job and starting a business. If that's the new thing, go ahead and do it. Just ask a question, listen instead of looking at your phone on a one-to-one. Engage with people in a different way. And that comes from starting with yourself by being clear on, this is what I stand for. This is me. And it's okay if the answer to that at first is, I'm not really sure. Maybe explore it with your partners. Do you know what's mad, Rob, about this, right? And the wife reminds me about this quite often. Many years ago, I was at the crossroads in my career, and I was an operational manager, and I'd worked for one business for 6 years, and then I was coming up to 4 years in another one, and I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I was a bit unsure. I did a good job wherever I was, and I'd progressed. And did I want to work in a big company? Did I want to go to I just didn't know. And I remember speaking to my wife about it. And I can still remember where I was actually driving down the motorway as we were going. I don't know where we were going, actually, but we were definitely on the motorway. Obviously going somewhere. But I can physically imagine...
Sounds like a Dominic Cummings story. This is. Get your eyes
Don't worry,
tested.
no, it's nothing about that. It was way before coronavirus. It was before we even married, actually. But I can envision the M6 where we were. And I was talking to her about it. And I just said to her, what do you think? What do you think I should do? Because I'm at a bit of a loss here. And I know I want to do something. I know I don't just want to turn up for work and not care. And she said to me, why don't you work in training? And I was like, I don't understand what you mean. What do you mean, training? Well, you clearly like working with people. You're good on your feet. You like an audience. You know, the things that my wife can say to me. She said, you clearly like the energy. And she said, and you're very good at explaining things. She said, you explain things to me that I don't even understand when you start talking to me. And then by the end of it, I know exactly what you mean. And it planted a seed. And from there, I then joined a bigger organization where I could have the opportunity to go into training. And, you know, the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah.
And I guess the relevance of that story is what I'm talking about there is, if when you start with what do I stand for and you're just a bit uncertain or you're uncertain what to do, go and ask the person who knows you best. Go and ask the people that you love, the people that you trust. And just really focus on building that level of self-awareness, because that's what allows you to see how you come across. It's what enables you to build a personal brand. It's what enables you to be the best version of you as a leader that you want to be.
Yeah, no, completely agree with you. I was thinking that my wife would probably say the opposite to me, that I take the simple and make it complicated. No, but I mean, coming full circle though, I think your wife should go back into the schools we were talking about earlier on and help people with the career guidance, because that's what people need sometimes. That is that sort of insight and guidance. And just let's put it another way. You said I think the words you just used were that the type of questions that my wife can ask me.
Yes.
And the reason she can ask you those questions is because she knows you, and she knows you well, and she's listened to you over the years. She's asked you questions over the years. You've shared things with each other over the years. You need to do a bit of that as a leader. You don't have to end up like a married couple at work, but at the same time, you'll learn certain things that will give you something.
Yes.
What I'd love to do now with you, Tim, is that I'm just kind of looking at all the notes that I've got there. I'm thinking to myself, right, where do we start in choosing a title for this episode of the podcast? And as usual, what I do is I jot down a few ideas as we go through. But I'm really interested, before I share anything like that, what have you got in mind? What springs to mind for you?
It's always going to be, it always starts with you.
Yeah, that's the first one I've got on my list.
Yeah. And it's fascinating, because one of the things that I did in lockdown last year when I was losing that connection with people was I did the online speaking tour.
Yeah.
And God, hundreds of people came to it. And then I've doing a tour this year where there's much more of a focus on personal development and me coaching people as part of it. Now, that's sold out.
Brilliant.
And the reason why that's relevant is the focus in the tour last year was actually called the It Always Starts With You tour. And then this time it's the Positive Influence tour. Again, the message is the same. It always starts with you. And that's what people have said to me from the back of that tour where I've connected people. And that's the point of the tour, is about being able to connect people.
Yeah.
And then when I work with leaders, that's what they always come back to is, I'd always thought I had to focus on them. I always thought that I had to do what my boss told me to do, and I always thought I had to start with them. And now I see it always starts with me. And the more I focus on that, the more I build relationships, the more I choose to not put myself in that situation, the more I choose to understand what's going on behind the behavior. And you can only do that when you start with yourself. And for me, that helps us to overcome those 3 blockers we talked about before. Definitely. Because obviously it builds self-motivation. It helps you to choose a response to the environment, and it makes you focus on whatever I learn on this leadership development, I'm going to choose what's right for me, and I'm going to focus to learn how I can learn to make those positive choices, because it always starts with
it's a strong foundation again, isn't it? It's the old adage of the degrees off course on a ship. When you at point 1, you might only be a single degree off, but a few hundred miles down the line, you're way off what you are now. Yeah. You're way off where you should have been. And that's sort of gap between who you really are and who you're actually being in that moment at work or whatever it might be. It's a massive difference. And as you've talked about it from your own personal story, and I'm sure many people relate to that, is that can be very difficult to be the person you're not.
Yeah, I there's maybe a bit of Viktor Frankl in this, but to me, nobody should be expected to be the person that you're not. Your why should be your own why. And, again, whatever you do, whether it is starting a business, being a CEO, being an inspirational speaker, being the best software developer in the world, or doing the same job for 20 years. Whatever you do, that's where it has to start. It has to start with you.
Yeah.
Because if you can put your own values into that, and you can go home every night and go, yeah, I turned up at bang on 9 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, I left at bang on 5 o'clock. During those hours, I behave like me.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't allow people to put me under pressure. And yeah, I think, we touched on it before in terms of that mental health challenges I had. That's because I knew if I stayed in that environment, I had to be somebody I'm not.
Yeah.
And I'm not prepared to do that. And I don't think anybody should be expected to do that. I really, really don't. I think it's something that as a human race, we should all embrace that, our faults and all. And trust me, I've got plenty of them, and my wife tells me about them as well.
We all have.
Yeah, we all have. And yeah, it's that's the bit for me is, I look at sometimes some organizations and the cultures I've worked in, and often the story of that organization is you've got this leader or the business founder or owner or a family or business partners that had the courage to start the business, and they went through the trials and tribulations. They went through the hard work of, it's Hugh Jackman, I'd say this, that for the first 5 years in business, it's got to be 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And they've done that, and they've built it, and they've got a brand, and they've gone from success to success. And now they've got a lot of people working for them, and they've got a history. That history might be 100 years, it might be 50 years, it might be 20 years. And over that history, suddenly they get to a point where they go, hey, this culture in this business just isn't right, is it? There's something missing. And then you start to untangle it, and you start to look at it, and it goes back to, it's because often the leadership of the business want it to be like the first 5 or 10 years when everything they did touched to gold. Yeah. And they didn't have to have conversations because the business was growing, and we were selling things, and we were growing, and we were growing, and I was in the newspaper, and everything was successful.
Yeah.
They want it to be that. Now, in their defense, many business leaders who create that don't have time to learn how to be a leader because they're building a business. So they want to go back to that. So they haven't stopped and said, they had to know what values was this business built on? Because I had good business acumen, and I invested, and I had a good product and a services, and I did the right thing. I must have had a value internally because I rewarded people, and I kept going to build a business, and I kept going to give people employment, and I've invested, So they don't stop and go back to that. And then what we do is we try to fix it. And then we suddenly spend all this time and money, yet the business leaders are still sat there going, I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. So it's so important that that's what we always go back to. And we ask ourselves, what do you stand for? What is it that you want this business to be like?
Yeah.
And helping them to see, actually, along the way, if we continue to create the environment, you don't have to fix it.
Yeah.
You allow it to nurture itself. And if you have to fix it, you can.
Yeah.
What you've got to do is focus on everybody who works in this business. The biggest thing we can do to help them to build the culture is help them to understand what they stand for, to help them to understand themselves. So when they walk through the door, they don't feel like they're being forced to be somebody they are not. Yeah. They're encouraged to be themselves. And, what I'll hold you accountable for. Yes, you said it before. I'll hold you accountable for doing your job. Absolutely. The reality is, if I create the right culture, you'll hold yourself more accountable for that than I 100%. Ever could.
And for those senior leaders to hold themselves accountable for the things we've just been talking about, because in those scenarios you've just talked about there, so often, and I like to use the word abdication, is that it's that as those businesses grow, suddenly the realization is, oh my God, we're going to have a bunch of people things we need to deal with now. We can't run it like we've always run it. We'll bring HR in, maybe L&D, maybe that's down the line. And we'll abdicate all of that people responsibility and accountability to them. No, you're gonna push a load of responsibility in that direction, but the accountability for the people, just like the sales, just like the tech support, just like the product, all that still comes back to that senior leadership team.
Yes.
Remember that and own that.
Yes.
And influence that all the way through. That's the reason why this succeeded beyond those first 5 years.
Yes. And when you look at businesses that people talk about now, the ones who've done that stand out. John Timpson,
Yeah.
You know, goes under the radar because his values are not to shout it from the rooftop and not to be all about him.
Yeah.
It's about creating the culture and the environment. You know, examples like that stand the test of time. And sometimes people approach me and ask me about starting my own business, and they ask me for help. And some of my friends have done it. And the first thing I say to them is, the first thing you need to do is write down, what do you stand for? What do you want that business to represent to you? Because it's going to be hard work.
Yeah.
It's going to be more hard work than you've ever experienced in your life. You've got to have self-motivation that you never thought was possible. And you have to know what you stand for, because in those dark times, when the temptation is to pack it in and get a job, or to take it out on other people, or to lash out, or to make rash decisions, that will come from not living up to what you stand for.
Yeah.
So if you want, when people start a business, they don't go, I just want to do it for a couple of years and see how it goes, and then I'll get a job again.
Yeah.
They talk about, I want to do this for the rest of my life, or I want to build an empire, or I want to make loads of money. You can't do that overnight. There's no such. Is it George Clooney said it took him 27 years to be an overnight success? I'm sure it was George Clooney. I'm sure I've heard that right. So you've got to set out for the long term. And so you've got to say, well,
100%.
The most important thing is what's at the heart of me, because that's what drives me reactions to the world.
Yeah.
Then I can develop the emotional intelligence to choose a positive response. And that's what makes my business sustainable. That's what makes sure I don't start lying to people, that I don't twist the figures here a little bit, and I don't put my wife as the biggest shareholder so she can get a massive dividend that I don't put tax on. And have I just started talking about Philip Green? Sorry. I hope you are listening to this podcast, Philip Green. I'll tell you my address if you want to have it out, pal. Sorry, I really don't like that man, because he stands for everything that goes against what I stand for. He's a narcissistic knobhead, basically. Sorry, I'm not breaking any legal stuff now, am I?
I've no idea, but I think I've just sorted the teaser trailer.
Yeah, maybe. But I pick on him because he's a famous example. He took money out of people's pension funds. But that's, for me, is because he and there's many more examples, by the way, but he just went on autopilot and reacted because he was focused on, I just want to keep making money and everything. And that's what we've got to do, is you've got to stop and say, well, no, what's the North Star? Because he'll have human values. He will have human values.
Yeah.
He's just never stopped to learn that about himself. Yeah. So that's what then takes him on that tirade of taking people's living away from them, taking all the money out of the business, etc., etc. Because then I can't make a decision based on what I stand for. I just make a decision on self-preservation of the money.
Yeah.
Or the status. So
it's that institutionalization again. It's that's what I've become.
Yeah.
That's kind of the tide that I'm now riding. It's very difficult to go against that tide once it's in flow.
It is. Yeah, I'm talking about that, and I'm obviously talking very passionately, and suggesting it's quite simple. You're right. It's very hard to go against that tide.
It's what we said at the start again, that these things are simple. They're very rarely easy.
They are. Yeah, we've just got to give ourselves the time and space. And it is what's always fascinating to me, Rob, is when you get people to talk about leaders that inspire them, and normally they talked about nowadays we'll talk about Barack Obama. Nowadays we'll talk about Oprah Winfrey, Michelle Obama.
Yeah.
They'll talk about Brené Brown, they'll talk about Simon Sinek, they'll talk about Steve Jobs. They'll talk about the guys from Google, whose names I can never, ever remember. And there's two guys that created Google. They'll talk about Bill Gates, won't we? Well, maybe a few people still talk about Richard Branson or a Sir Alex Ferguson or, a sporting hero, a Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
What we often miss about all of those people, and of course, people will also name people like Zoe and Martin and Rob and Karine, who they know personally. What we miss is that what binds them together is the self-awareness and their emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Now, they might not know that themselves, and Steve Jobs would never talk about that. Winston Churchill wouldn't. Winston Churchill had more self-awareness than any leader you could ever read about. He didn't always put it in the right place. However, products of the environment, that's why he did some of the things. He journaled every night, every experience. If that's not self-awareness, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
So that's what binds them all together is these inspirational leaders Usain Bolt, man, that man's got self-awareness like you would not believe.
Yeah.
You know, that's what binds them together. And then they channel that to develop that emotional intelligence. So I'll talk about Sir Alex Ferguson. I know it won't please you. One of the most amazing...
Klopp off that list.
I know. So, well, he's got self-awareness, unbelievable, but I'm going to be biased and choose Fergie.
Of course.
What people miss with a leader like him is because he was quite a autocratic leader at times, is the level of self-awareness and the things that he did behind the scenes and the awareness that he had when to build the next great team, the awareness he had when Mourinho came on the scene. So Mourinho came along as the new book, the challenger. Yep. Alex Ferguson had a team. This is 2004. Yep. Had a team that was on the wane, and the Nevilles, the Giggs were just having to evolve, shall we say, as players. They were having to change the game, and they were getting injuries, and he was having to bring new young players in, and he realised he didn't have another class of 92 somewhere.
Yeah.
And he used his self-awareness to go, right, Arsene Wenger's the top dog right now because they've just gone a season unbeaten. I'm changing a team. I've got this guy over here called Mourinho, the special one, who is going to be a threat. He's going to come in and change. And what Ferguson did, purely through self-awareness, was he knew at that time, I can't beat this Arsenal team right now, and I'm not going to be able to beat Mourinho right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a relationship with Jose Mourinho, because he'll then get rid of Arsene Wenger's team for me.
Yeah.
He'll create success for Chelsea. And then in the background, I can build a team, and I can go and buy players, and I can bring young players in, and I can win the odd trophy.
Yeah.
And then fast forward 3 years from 2004, his new team does what Mourinho and Wenger have still never done to this day. They win 3 championships in a row, plus a European Cup.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I'm not saying that because I'm a United fan. That's the success that self-awareness brings. Because your self-awareness also says, what's my strength right now, and where should I put my energy? Well, my energy now should go into building a team that's going to compete in 2 or 3 years, because if I put this team under pressure, we will fail, and it'll take me longer to recover.
Yeah.
And that's what that is. It's self-awareness. Yes, it's football knowledge. Of course it is. It's everything else that comes with it. And it's this controlling leadership style. Of course he was a controller as a leader. It's self-awareness to go, I can let him fight that battle over here.
Yeah.
And I can build this team.
The thing is, I mean, I hear a lot about that kind of controlling style, but I also hear stories, you watch them on Sky Sports now and again, little snippets, and Gary Neville talking about the time that Eric Cantona went and did the Kung Fu kick, and they were all giggling in the dressing room waiting for him to come in and absolutely take a swipe at Cantona for doing it. And he didn't, apparently. He just looked around the room and gave everyone telling off that had done something wrong in the match because they'd drawn or lost against Palace, whatever it was. But Cantona went, Eric, lad, you can't do that.
Absolutely.
But that again was the emotional intelligence. Right or wrong, you can say it was right, you say it was wrong, whatever you want. But he knew how to handle that person in that situation. So it didn't become something bigger.
Yeah, and you're right, he talks about that, doesn't he? He's written about that he had the awareness that if I destroy him, everything will get destroyed, because he had the them and us mentality, he created the siege mentality. So he knew that if I let go of that, and criticize this player, then the players will go, oh my God, we're going to lose Cantona. What are we going to do without him? And you're right, that comes from self-awareness. That it's that amazing ability that having, I mean, we're talking about a very famous leader here, but the joke for many years when he was at Old Trafford was he went to more funerals in Manchester than anyone else, because he went to supporters' funerals. If he got invited and he could go, he would go. And you're talking about, he turned up at a guy's funeral who worked in a factory in Trafford Park for 50 years that he'd never met, but the family wrote to him because he had a season ticket and he would turn up. He wrote to my nana, he's written to my dad when my dad was poorly. And that's the self-awareness to go, I don't need to talk about that stuff. I need to do it because it's important. And that comes from his upbringing in terms of, the governed shipyards that he talks about, doesn't he? The people make Glasgow is now the slogan, rightly, for that city. So, sorry, I've kind of gone into football there because it's a passion of mine. And yes, I was being biased choosing Ferguson, but it leaders like that we see for success, and we see for power, and we see for possibly controlling. actually, when you strip it back, the ones who maintain their relationships and enhance their reputation, what binds them together is self-awareness. And that ultimately drives that emotional intelligence. And,
100%.
we're talking about Winston Churchill before. The term emotional intelligence didn't exist. When the first time it was used was in the 1960s. And, I think he was, I won't remember the year, but I mean, he I think he died in the 1960s, actually, if I remember right. So, he was demonstrating it before the world knew what it was. And that's what it brings it back to is, I always say, when we talk about goals, I always say to leaders, anyone can write a goal. Anyone can write a plan. Anyone can write a strategy. Anyone can create a product. Anyone can set out what they're going to do as the business plan. The difference is the people who have the self-motivation to do it and to face the fear and to flex when it needs to flex and to be bloody minded and resilient when you need to be. That comes through emotional intelligence.
And to seek the support if and when they need it. Because that's the thing. Some people might think now's the time to walk away from it. Well, some people will go, now's the time I just need some little bit of support or guidance or advice. And that's what you do now. I hear that, Ollie will still reach out to Alex Ferguson from time to time because why wouldn't you?
What exactly? I mean, the famous story about Fergie that always sticks in my mind was when that happened with Cantona. And he knew he had to make a decision whether to sack him or not. So the game had gone and the press had vilified him and the police have chatted, blah, blah, blah. And he knew he had to make a decision. And he tells a story about he was driving to the meeting with Cantona, his lawyers, and Maurice Watkins, a United lawyer, and all that. And the person he phoned, and I won't remember the person's name, I'm sure his first name was Roland. The person he phoned was the then chairman of Marks and Spencer's. Not Bobby Robson, not Kenny Dalglish, not Franz Beckenbauer. He phoned the chairman of what then was the biggest retail institution in the UK. And he asked for his advice. And his words to him was, I don't know what to do. I really, really don't know what to do because this side are telling me this. Internally, I'm saying this to myself. And then I've also got this pressure. And he phoned somebody who's completely outside of his environment. He had a relationship with the guy and he asked him for his advice. And again, that's the emotional intelligence of going, I'm driving to this meeting. I'm stressed. I'm worried. I'm thinking about the consequences for everybody. I just need to say to someone, I don't know what to do. And he said that's the conversation that convinced him the right thing to do was to stand by him. And it paid off, I think it's fair to say. So you're right, it's having the ability to just say, I just don't know what to do, actually. This is what I'm feeling. What do you think? And just giving yourself that space, again, to raise the self-awareness.
I think it comes right back to the very start of what we were talking about, and that is giving leaders the permission to be able to do this. Don't wait for that permission.
Absolutely.
Assume that permission to be able to ask for help and when you're struggling, say it. If people that would love to get in touch with you or follow what you do or actually get you involved in what they're doing, Tim, how can they do that? What's the best way for them to do it?
So from a social media point of view, but the best thing to do is connect with me on LinkedIn. So I'm Tim Roberts, Enthuse Coaching. You could find me very easily with that. My contact details on there. Or visit my website, which is enthusecoaching.com. So there's a bit more on there in terms of what I've done, who I work with, and of course you can contact me via that. And it's always great whenever I do things like this. People do reach out, whether that's to work with me or just to say hello, whether to tell me that I should have stopped talking about Sir Alex Ferguson or just the website is one of the best ways to get in touch with me.
Perfect. I will. I'll make sure I put those details on as well for the listener on the descriptions on YouTube and all the other areas. So if people want to get in touch with you quickly, you can just click on those links. Thank you very much for today, Tim. I've absolutely loved that conversation, and I'm sure it won't be the last one we do because we get a lot of mileage out of digging even deeper into some of those things.
Lots more to talk about. But I really appreciate the opportunity, Rob. And I think a big credit for you is how quickly that time's passed in terms of how you facilitate these conversations. So I'm already a big fan of your podcast. So I feel very honoured to be part of it. So thank you for giving me a chance to share my stories.
Well, thank you very much, Tim. That means a lot. Have a good one, and we'll speak soon.
You too, mate. Take care.
Ta-da. So that brings us to the end of this episode of the Leadership Untitled podcast. This episode will be called It Always Starts With You. All that remains is to thank again Tim for joining me and having a fantastic conversation around all things emotional intelligence. Obviously, I want to thank you again at home, the listener, for listening in today's episode and also for subscribing. And if you've not done so, make sure you do so you don't miss out on future episodes. If you'd like to get in touch with me, use the email address rob@robmoores.com or visit the website of the same name, robmoores.com, or just look me up on LinkedIn. You're sure to find me on there sharing thoughts, ideas and content. Until next time, have a great day. Bye now.